Good morning, everyone. It's such a joy to see so many familiar faces and some new ones. I'm Nayaswami Jyoti, and this is Erin, and we're here to serve with you today in this service and following with a satsang. So today, our focus from Swami Kriyananda's book, Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible. Deeds versus intentions. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ emphasized repeatedly the spirit, not the letter of the law. In chapter 5 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, he speaks of the sin of killing and of the legal punishment attendant on that sin, but says that more important than the act is the desire to kill or to do harm. He shows that the sin of harmful desire goes beyond merely wanting to kill. My message to you, he said, is this: whoever is angry with his brother without cause already stands condemned. Whoever contemptuously calls his brother a fool shall answer for it to the Supreme Council. And whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. Brother here means any other human being. For all of us, in the highest sense, are brothers and sisters, children of our one Father, Mother, God. The true self of one is the self of all. To hurt another is, even if one doesn't realize it, to hurt oneself. Swami Kriyananda, in The Path, recalls an episode in which the master, Paramhansa Yogananda, revealed his sense of identity even with the plants. One day, Kriyananda wrote, we were moving a delicate but rather heavy tropical plant into position on the hillside. Our handling evidently was too rough, for Master cried out, "Be careful what you are doing. Can't you feel? It's alive." To wish death to anyone, to wish even harm to another creature, is to deny in oneself the reality of that divine life of which all of us are manifestations. It is, in short, to deny the eternal truth proclaimed by the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. This self is never born, nor does it perish. Once existing, it cannot ever cease to be. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, ever itself. It is not slain when the body is slain. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Good morning. Shall I use this microphone? Okay. Very good. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be here visiting from Ananda Village. It's nice to see all of you. I'm going to start with a reading from Whispers from Eternity, Yogananda's book of prayer demands and poems. And this is one of his prayer demands for children, which I don't usually spend time with, but this one's just perfect for today, I think. It's called, By Loving All My Friends, May I Find Thy Love. Mother Divine, make me love equally every friend in my life. By loving them, may I find thy love in all hearts everywhere. Teach me to return even greater love to those who love me, and to pray also, and even especially, for those who do not love me. I will secretly enjoy loving them, for they too, though they know it not, are my brothers and sisters in God. It's an interesting reading this morning, deeds versus intentions. It's interesting, the reading from the Bible, because I think I can say I know we're not thinking about killing or harming people intentionally. And yet, how often do we maybe judge someone or criticize or blame or maybe use unkind words, or even just in our thoughts? And so this is what we really have to pay attention to, is not so much our outward deeds, but the energy and the consciousness behind what we say and what we do, and even the thoughts that we think. Because our thoughts have power. And there's a wonderful story from the autobiography of a yogi. Yogananda's in his guru's ashram with Sri Yukteswar, and a mosquito comes in. And just as the mosquito's about to land and bite him, he raises his hand to swat the mosquito, and then he stops because he remembers Patanjali's aphorism on nonviolence. And so he thinks, oh, I won't kill the mosquito. And Sri Yukteswar says, why don't you finish the job? And Yogananda's surprised. He says, Master, do you advocate killing? And Sri Yukteswar says, no, but the death blow had already been struck in your mind. It's not the act of killing. That's not what we're doing, any of us, but the desire, the thought, the harmful, unkind thoughts that we put out. I was thinking as we were dealing with the mics this morning, it was funny, we were putting this on and Nirmala said, make sure after service that you turn it off so everyone doesn't have to hear your conversation. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if we all had one of these on all the time? How might that change the things that we say? Or if we had a little thought microphone, how might that change the thoughts that we think? Well, the reality is there is sort of a thought microphone in a sense, because Divine Mother, the Guru, always knows our every thought. God knows our every thought. And, he doesn't seek to punish us, but what happens is when we judge, when we criticize, when we have an unkind thought, yes, of course we create a sense of separation with other people, but also with God. We create a sense of separation with that divine presence in ourselves, in every being, anytime we have an unkind thought towards someone else. But the opposite is also true. When we love, when we're kind, when we respect others, when we help others, we strengthen that connection with God. We strengthen that connection with that divine presence that's flowing through every atom of creation, that's flowing through us and through that person that we're helping or that we're kind to. And so the lesson is, yes, love others, but not because it's good or because it's nice or it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only way we're ever really going to find God, is if we learn to be kind to others, if we learn to love others, because it's not our love that we're loving with. It's that divine love that's flowing through us. And we just have to make that effort. We just have to put our thoughts, our energy in that direction to be kind rather than to judge. And when we don't, we push circumstances away, we push people away, we can't expect to feel God near. These two go hand in hand. We have to begin to see every circumstance, every person as an expression of that divine presence. And if we really did, how would we act? How would we behave? A little differently maybe in some circumstances. And that's the opportunity that we have. That's the invitation. So I wanted to share a few stories of how we can tune into that divine presence and how we can learn to love others. There was this wonderful story I found on the internet. There are some redeeming qualities, some redeeming stories out there. And it was the story of a man who went to a Waffle House restaurant in Florida, and there was an older gentleman sitting there dining by himself, and so he said hello when he went in. And as he was leaving, he saw the man had all of these bills, all this money out on the table. And so this man stopped to talk with him and ask him about it. And he said, I give away money to people, 1s and 5s, to children, strangers, people I meet here at the Waffle House and other places. And I've given away maybe over $13,000 over the years. And so this other man noticed that he was pinning to each bill, he was pinning a little note that said, love everybody. And so he asked him, why do you put that note there? And the man said, those are the last words that my mother said to me. Not I love you, but love everybody. And that's Divine Mother's message to all of us. Love everybody. No exceptions. And what happens when we try to do that? We feel ourselves in the presence of God. Because God loves everybody, no exceptions. And the more we try to do that ourselves, the more we try to tune into that unconditional love and be an expression of that unconditional love, the nearer we feel to God, the more we feel God's presence in our lives, in every situation, in every relationship, we can feel that divine presence. In the Festival of Light that we read every week, it says, in God all are equal. Not only Jesus Christ, Lord Krishna, great saints everywhere, but, and this is the only part in the whole festival that's bolded, which I think is interesting, even in essence, those on earth who have sinned most greatly. Of all this beautiful poetry and all this beautiful ceremony that we read every week, that's the bolded line. Something to think about. Even in essence, those on earth who have sinned most greatly. In God, all are equal. A few months ago, I read this wonderful book by a Catholic priest in the Jesuit tradition, Father Greg Boyle, and he started out in East LA. He was at this Catholic church, which was at the time the poorest Catholic church in the entire city, in an area of highest gang violence in the city. The territory of 8 different gangs intersected there. And when he started out, he just went out and started to talk to people, talk to the gang members. And many of them were very young, children. And he realized they'd been kicked out of their schools, so he started a school. He realized they needed jobs, so he tried to find jobs. It was hard to find felony-friendly jobs for people that had come out of prison, so he started to create jobs. And little by little, this organization was created called Homeboy Industries, which is now the largest, most successful gang rehabilitation and reentry program in the world. Very humble beginnings. And it's an inspiring story in and of itself, but what I find interesting is when he first started, people were not only not supportive, they were outright angry with him for what he was doing. He would get hate mail and bomb threats, terrible messages, because he was helping gang members. And people, even the police, thought, these are bad people. These people are the problem. Why are you helping them? And it didn't stop him, obviously, because he came from that unconditional love of Christ. And he said, there is no us and them. There's just us. There's just us. There's no good people and bad people. There's just us. Think about that for a moment. If we could all live in that consciousness and that awareness, just us, all brothers and sisters in God, it's a beautiful vision. And really, as I was thinking about it this week, I realized that's Yogananda's ideal of world brotherhood. Just us. There's nobody outside of this. There's no other people. It's just us, all children of God. And how would we relate to others if we came from that consciousness? Because that's the truth. That's the reality. But we get confused. We get caught in our egos and thinking, well, I'm this and they're that. All the stories we come up with, all the reasons we come up with. But no, it's just us. Just children of God. And that's the beauty of our Ananda communities. Why Swami Kriyananda created Ananda. For all of us to be able to have an experience, to get to practice being more and more in the awareness of that connection to each other and to our divine self within. And it's such a gift to be able to live in community, to be in community, because, that idea of separation, it's just an idea. It's just an illusion that we're separate from each other. It's just a habit, a habitual way of seeing and perceiving and relating to the world that's been reinforced over and over and over again through many lifetimes. But when we're in community, we get to practice, we get to form a different habit, a different way of seeing and relating that's based in connection, that's based in brotherhood and sisterhood. And we get to really see that and feel that on a daily basis. At Ananda Village, I joke sometimes with people like, if you are going to go down to the mailroom, make sure you have at least an hour, because inevitably you're going to bump into someone or someone's, and it's not like it is in the world. You're not going to just zip in and zip out. You can do that, but most times we just don't. We just can't, because they're our friends, they're our brothers and sisters, and we want to spend time with them, and we want to say hello to them. It's such a beautiful blessing. I think about when anyone is unwell, any emergency comes up, or anyone needs anything, the whole community just mobilizes, and I'm sure you have that here too in your community, that anytime anyone needs prayers, anyone needs anything, we come together to help each other. And it's not always like that in the world. And so it's such a blessing to be a part of this, to create this, to put this consciousness of connection, that we belong to each other, that we all belong. There's no exceptions. And that we can really practice that divine love, that unconditional love. A couple months ago, there was a woman, I was driving back from meditation, and there was a woman walking up the street towards me, and I didn't recognize her, so I thought she must be a guest, and she looked a little lost, so I pulled over and asked her where she was trying to go, and she was trying to get to Hansa Temple, which was nowhere near where she was, so I started to give her directions, and she was looking more and more confused, and I said, you know what, why don't you just hop in and I'll give you a ride over? And she kind of hesitated for a moment, and then she got in, and so I started driving her over, and we were talking a little bit, and all of a sudden she said, I don't usually take rides from strangers. And I was stunned almost to silence, because never once had I thought of her as a stranger. It was such an interesting concept. To her, I was a stranger. To me, she was just another friend. She was just another person in my community that, of course, I would give her a ride. I mean, it didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even think twice. And it's so interesting, that consciousness. What do we practice, right? What do we reinforce? And I can't say that's necessarily a reflection of me and my consciousness. It's the reflection of the community and the consciousness that I'm surrounded by day after day, and of our meditation practice and everything that we do to reinforce that connectedness. It's just so interesting. I didn't even think of her as a stranger. Isn't that funny? And we could do that with anyone. Why think of people as strangers? Why think of people as someone else? Why keep people at a distance? God doesn't do that. God doesn't do that. But sometimes our fear gets in the way of loving. But St. John said, perfect love casts out all fear. And I was thinking of St. Francis as such a beautiful example of that perfect love, of that divine compassion. And with all creatures, with all people, seeing everyone as brothers and sisters, even the birds and the trees. There's a beautiful story of the town of Gubbio in Italy, which during the life of St. Francis, during his time, found itself under siege from a lone wolf that was attacking in the animals and then the people, until the mayor finally sent 3 of the strongest guards out into the woods to take care of the wolf, and the guards didn't come back. And they didn't know what to do. And St. Francis came along, and he heard about what was happening, and he said, I'll go and talk to the wolf. And everyone, no, don't, it's dangerous. They didn't believe that he could talk to the wolf. They couldn't imagine. And so St. Francis went into the woods, and he met the wolf. And as soon as the wolf saw him, he started charging towards St. Francis, teeth bared, ready to attack. And St. Francis just made the sign of the cross, and the wolf stopped. And he walked up and laid at St. Francis's feet. And they had a conversation. St. Francis prayed, and he understood that the wolf was just hungry. He didn't know what else to do. He was just doing the best that he could. He didn't mean to do harm. And they came to an arrangement that the wolf would stop attacking the people if the people would be willing to feed the wolf, to take care of him. And I think about, why did the wolf stop? Because of the power of that divine, unconditional love. It's transformative. That willingness of St. Francis to listen, to understand, to try to understand this ferocious, dangerous, evil creature, to see that divine light, that divine potential in him. Yogananda said, Swami Kriya-yoga, these are his words. He said, try to understand why others do what they do, even when they're doing wrong things or are trying to hurt you. Try to understand where they're coming from, and you'll be amazed at how much compassion that gives you. And that's what the saints, that's what the masters come to show us, that divine potential we have to love, and to remind us of that goodness, of that love that's already in us. That's who we really are. there's a beautiful story, many beautiful stories, and maybe even some of you here who met Swami Kriyananda could tell beautiful stories of experiences with Swami. But I was reading recently a story of a guru by a friend in Italy, Jayadev, who was saying how earlier in his life he was not very well behaved, always getting himself into trouble. And he said even when he first came to the community, he was sort of always getting himself into trouble somehow or another. But Swami was so patient with him. And one day they were out to lunch with a group of people and having fun, telling stories. And then at a certain point, Swami looked at Jayadev and said, "Jayadev, you are a jewel. You are a jewel." And he said, I felt so deeply touched that someone could see that goodness in me, that someone could believe in me, be willing to see that light. And he said, ever since then, I've always tried to see that jewel of the soul in every person, especially in those difficult people. You are a jewel. And that's what the saints and the masters come to remind us of, but also what we can remind each other of in community, that we can try to see that soul light, to see that soul potential. Maybe the outward behavior and the habits and everything are not so nice or not so easy, but at the center, there's just us. There's just God. There's just that divine presence in all of us. And I'll end with this story because I understand not everyone is easy to love. Here I am saying love everybody, and I think everyone here could probably think of at least one person they'd rather not. It's just how it is. It's how it is. And that's what we're here to learn. We're here to be educated and entertained. And Yogananda said, how few of us are either. But really, take this life as an opportunity to learn. We don't have to be perfect. We're not, or else we wouldn't be here. We're here to learn these lessons. We're here to learn how to love unconditionally. Make the effort. And when it's difficult, let God love through you. So I'll end with this story about Corrie ten Boom, who was a Christian woman in Holland. Her and her family helped during World War II, helped to hide and bring Jewish people to safety. They hid them in their home, and they got caught, and her sister went into a concentration camp. And she has a beautiful book called The Hiding Place that tells many of the stories from her experience there with her sister, and not just of her experience there, but of their faith, of the strength of their faith, and how that really made for a different experience in some ways. And so when, unfortunately, her sister didn't survive, but when she was released, she went on to travel around the world, sharing with people about God's love, and especially about God's forgiveness. And in 1947, she found herself in Germany, and she gave this beautiful talk on God's forgiveness. And at the end of the talk, she saw this gentleman walking towards her, and she realized it was one of the guards. And she just sort of froze, And he came up to her, and he said, "It's a wonderful talk. Thank you so much," and put out his hand. And she said, I fumbled in my pocketbook. Here I was, just having given this talk on God's forgiveness, and I just couldn't even bring myself to shake his hand. I mean, I think we can imagine that difficulty of that, considering what she'd been through. And he said, I was so glad to hear and I know that God forgives me, but I'd like to hear it from your lips. Will you forgive me? And again, he puts out his hand. And you can imagine the struggle, She knows what she has to do because she's seen from her own experience those that went through what she went through and have forgiven, have been able to move on with their lives. They've been able to heal. And she's also seen those that harbor bitterness. They don't thrive. They never quite move on. They're never able to fully live. And so she knows she has to forgive. And yet she feels nothing in her heart. This coldness. And so she prays, Jesus, help me. I'll put out my hand, but you supply the feeling. And so she, using her will, puts out her hand. And as soon as she shakes his hand, she feels this current traveling down her arm, this warmth filling her whole being. And she says, I forgive you, brother, with my whole heart. And she said she's never felt that love of God so strongly as she did in that moment. So even when it's difficult, love everybody. Let God love everybody through you. Be the channel. Show up. Use your will. Let God, let the Master supply the feeling, supply the love, because it's their love anyways. We can't really love. But we can make the effort to be kind, to have the right intention, and to call on God to love others in every circumstance, in every situation. God bless.
We'll prepare now for our offertory.